It came to pass when Jesus had finished these sayings that he departed from Galilee and came to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. Great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him, and saying to him, Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? Then he answered and said to them, Have you not read that he who made them in the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then, they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we share together Matthew chapter 19, verses 1 to 12. Jesus is challenged about the teaching of marriage, that a marriage is between a man and a woman, and it is to be permanent, that God has established it this way. There was provision made in the Old Testament for divorce. Now, Jesus strongly affirms that in the beginning, God made them male and female. He designed a system for a family based on the complementary characteristics of male and female, that a man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two should become one flesh. This was the first relationship that was formed. It is not good that man should be alone, and God provided a wife, a spouse, for Adam. And God's purpose was that it should be the basis of society, more fundamental than any government or other relationship, for they came later. Many people find marriage a challenge and think it would be better to be out of this situation. The Pharisees further questioned Jesus, therefore, and said, Why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. The disciples said to him, If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. But he said to them, All cannot accept this saying, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born thus from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He who is able to accept it, let him accept it. The Pharisees said Moses gave a command for a man to divorce his wife. So Jesus' first point is that no, Moses did not give a command to divorce your wife. Moses permitted you to divorce your wife and said that if you were going to divorce your wife, you had to make it formal in writing. Moses allowed you to divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. But the statement about the nature of marriage came at the beginning. It was not from the beginning that God had a plan for divorce. That was just God's accommodation to the hardness of your heart, the unwillingness that people have sometimes to forgive. Well, this is the context that we need to forgive. In chapter 18, we had the discussion, how many times should I forgive my brother? Well, a marriage is a place where there needs to be much forgiveness. But love covers a multitude of sins. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. And so, in marriage, we need to forgive our spouse, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And so, maintain the relationship, because what God has joined together, let not man separate. Jesus has said, because of the hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. But now he makes a statement in his own name. He's setting his word even above Moses. So, in a sense, he's setting aside what Moses has said and says, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. The instructions for life can be classified as laws and as regulations and as statutes. And the regulation concerning divorce is of much lower level than the commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. A common reason for divorce is that you've fallen out of love with that person and you've fallen in love with somebody else. And Jesus is saying if you divorce a person to marry somebody else, that's just plain adultery. Jesus extends the whole issue to the matter of remarriage. And this has caused much discussion among Christians. Can a Christian remarry? As I understand Paul's teaching in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, a Christian shouldn't divorce their spouse, though they may have to separate if life becomes intolerable. But if the spouse divorces you, then you are free to remarry another believer, especially if the original partner has remarried. Well, the basis here is, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. The commandment was, thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, there is an exception here. The point is that they had asked, is it legal for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And Jesus is giving the one reason, sexual immorality, that the wife, and it would apply the other way around, has committed herself to another man. And in that context, divorce is permitted. The concept of one man and one woman being one flesh has been broken. When Jesus himself was conceived of the Virgin Mary, she was betrothed, promised in marriage. It was a legal marriage that had not been consummated between Mary and Joseph. And so Joseph was looking to divorce Mary, but not in a public offensive way, in a quiet way, because it appeared that she had been guilty of immorality. Indeed, this was a big deal in his case because he had the title to the throne of Israel, and her son would inherit that title, yet not be his son, until the Holy Spirit said, no, you take her to be your wife. And so he did. That marriage was not broken. But in general, in any other case, when one partner has gone off with somebody else, then Jesus permits divorce. On the basis of Paul's teaching, the person who has gone off with somebody else should seek the divorce. So in this context, it is fine to remarry. Whoever who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. So God's purpose is that one man and one woman forever. And that's clearly being taught by Jesus. Well, the disciples kind of respond, hey, that's not possible. Surely people must be able to divorce. Otherwise, it would be better never to marry. And Jesus says, well, it's good for some people not to marry. It's a choice that you must make. You don't have to get married. There are some people who have been made eunuchs. They cannot father children. Some because they are born that way, some because they have been made that way by men, and some because they've made that choice themselves that they will remain single. But not everybody can receive that. It's not a command that you must marry, and there's not a command that you must remain single. But it is the natural course of events for the majority of people that they will marry. Jesus remained single, but all the apostles and the brothers of the Lord married, except for Barnabas and Paul. For the benefits of marriage, particularly to a believing spouse, far outweigh the disadvantages. What God has joined together, let not man separate.